Three's Company once lit up living rooms with laughter, unforgettable characters, and the kind of comedic chaos that defined the 70s and 80s. But behind the scenes, the joy was shadowed by real-life heartbreak, tragic accidents, painful illnesses, and untimely deaths that claimed some of the show's most cherished stars. Today, we're revisiting the heartbreaking stories behind the laughter and honoring the legacies they left behind. If you grew up with this classic, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep their memory alive. Suzanne Summers as Chrissy Snow, America's golden girl with a hidden storm. Suzanne Marie Summers, born October 16, 1946, in sunny California, became a household name in the late 1970s, lighting up television screens as the bubbly, blonde Chrissy Snow on Three's Company. From 1977 to 1981, between the ages of 31 and 35, she captured the nation's heart with her comedic timing, radiant beauty, and irresistible charm. But behind the dazzling smile was a woman shaped by hardship, heartache, and quiet rebellion. Raised in a struggling working-class family, Suzanne's childhood was scarred by her father's alcoholism and violent outbursts. At just 17, after he ripped her prom dress and publicly humiliated her, she struck back, literally, with a tennis racket. It was a defining act of defiance, signaling a fierce spirit that would carry her through the storms ahead. By 19, an unplanned pregnancy led to a rushed marriage and a swift divorce. Broke and desperate, she was arrested for check fraud and even posed for semi-nude photos to pay for her young son's medical bills. Images that would later resurface in Playboy, published without her full consent once fame found her. Her biggest blow came at the height of her success. In 1980, Suzanne dared to demand equal pay to co-star John Ritter. ABC's response was brutal. They slashed her role, alienated her from the cast, and ultimately fired her. Blacklisted and branded difficult, her once blazing TV career was abruptly extinguished. Years later, she confessed that standing up for equal pay cost her everything, but she never regretted the fight. She roared back in the 90s with the hit show Step by Step and later transformed herself into a wellness mogul and best-selling author. Yet even in reinvention, controversy followed. Suzanne became a fierce advocate for alternative medicine and bioidentical hormone therapy, views that drew harsh criticism from the medical community. When diagnosed with breast cancer in 2000, she chose surgery and radiation, but famously refused chemotherapy. It was a decision that ignited debate and speculation, especially after the cancer returned in early 2023. On October 15, 2023, just one day before her 77th birthday, Suzanne Summers passed away peacefully at her Palm Springs home. Her net worth at the time? A staggering $100 million. But more than money, it was her resilience, her courage to stand alone, and her refusal to be silenced that defined her legacy. Suzanne wasn't just Chrissy Snow. She was a survivor, a trailblazer, and a woman who turned pain into power. John Ritter as Jack Tripper, the man who made America laugh and then broke its heart. Jonathan Southworth Ritter, born on September 17, 1948, wasn't just an actor. He was a spark of joy in millions of living rooms across America. As Jack Tripper on Three's Company, he redefined sitcom comedy. From 1977 to 1984, at just 28 years old, he played the lovable, clumsy culinary student who constantly found himself in laugh-out-loud situations with two female roommates. His brilliant timing, physical comedy, and effortless charm turned him into a TV legend. But behind the laughter, John carried private battles few ever knew. Born with a condition called coloboma in his right eye, he had impaired vision since childhood. Yet he never let it define him. Against doubts and limitations, he pushed forward, chasing his dream with unwavering determination. Fame came fast, but it came at a cost. His nearly 20-year marriage to actress Nancy Morgan eventually crumbled under the pressure. His relentless work ethic often left him physically exhausted and emotionally drained. Still, he never stopped showing up with a smile. Then came the day that shocked the world. On September 11, 2003, while filming 8 Simple Rules at Walt Disney Studios, John suddenly collapsed with severe chest pain. Doctors thought it was a heart attack and rushed to treat him, but the truth was even more tragic. It was an aortic dissection, a rare, often missed condition. Just hours later, at 10:48 p.m., John Ritter was gone. He was only 54, just 6 days shy of his birthday. The news devastated Hollywood. Friends, fans, and co-stars were left reeling. Joyce DeWitt, his longtime Three's Company co-star, described him as impossible not to love. The show he died filming was never the same. Its tone, its direction, its heart forever altered. The final episodes became a tribute to the man who once carried the show with laughter and love. At the time of his death, John Ritter had a net worth of $20 million, but his true legacy wasn't money. It was the joy he brought, the memories he made, and the laughter he left behind. He lived for the craft, gave his all to every role, and reminded us all that behind every joke, there can be pain, but through every struggle, there's still room to shine. Don Knotts as Ralph Furley, a life of laughter and loneliness behind the spotlight. Don Knotts, born Jesse Donald Knotts on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia, was a man who could light up a room with laughter, but few knew the shadows he carried within. At age 55, he stepped into the iconic role of Ralph Furley on Three's Company, 1979 to 1984, the eccentric, fashion-forward landlord with wild confidence and an unshakable belief he was a ladies' man. It was a role that reintroduced him to a younger audience and reminded the world of his comedic genius, first cemented during his unforgettable run on The Andy Griffith Show in the 1960s. But beneath the trademark grin and nervous energy was a man shaped by deep trauma. Don grew up in dire poverty, haunted by a father plagued with schizophrenia, an unstable presence who reportedly threatened his children with a knife. Fear and uncertainty were constant companions. By age 13, Don lost his father and was left emotionally scarred, a quiet and anxious boy trying to find safety in a world that rarely offered it. Though he brought joy to millions, Don suffered privately from crippling anxiety and depression. These battles often took a toll on his personal life. Both of his marriages, to Catherine Metz and later to Laura Lee Chuckna, ended in divorce, largely due to his emotional unpredictability and obsessive health fears. While he was known for his charm and flirtatious nature, lasting love always seemed just out of reach. In his later years, Don's health began to decline. He was diagnosed with lung cancer and endured chronic pneumonia. Macular degeneration robbed him of most of his eyesight, leaving him nearly blind. Despite these hardships, he continued to lend his voice to animated projects like Chicken Little, 2005, and Air Buddies, 2006, though he slowly retreated from public life. On February 24, 2006, Don Knotts passed away peacefully at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 81. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $20 million, a testament to a career that spanned over half a century in television, film, and commercials. Don Knotts made the world laugh while quietly battling demons few could see. His story is a poignant reminder that behind the brightest smiles often lie the deepest sorrows. Audra Lindley as Helen Roper, a quiet star with a heavy heart. Audra Lindley, born on September 24, 1918, in Los Angeles, carved her place in television history with her unforgettable role as Helen Roper, the sharp-tongued, wisecracking wife in Three's Company and its spin-off The Ropers. When she stepped into the role at 59, Lindley brought more than comedy to the screen. She infused Helen with a bittersweet humanity. Beneath the loud prints, big curls, and sarcastic sighs was a woman aching for affection, trapped in a marriage that mocked romance. But that depth didn't come from the script. It came from Audra herself. Her life had been anything but easy. At one point, she walked away from the spotlight to raise 5 children, navigating years of sacrifice and struggle as she balanced motherhood with the burning pull of performance. Her first husband, Hardy Ulm, passed away in 1970, leaving her to shoulder the burden alone. A second marriage to actor James Whitmore offered hope, but it ended in divorce in 1979, the same year she left the Ropers. 2 heartbreaks, 5 children, and a career that always seemed just out of reach. She kept going. Though her big break came late, her portrayal of Helen earned her a Golden Globe nomination. But afterward, the leading roles faded. She was often cast as weary mothers, aging women left behind, roles that echoed her own quiet loneliness. Still, she never stopped working. Even in her late 70s, as she privately battled leukemia, she continued to show up, determined to keep her craft alive. She was preparing to film a new episode of the sitcom Sybil when she was suddenly hospitalized at Cedars-Sinai. She never made it back to set. Audra Lindley passed away on October 16, 1997, at the age of 79. Her ashes were gently laid to rest beside her parents at Woodlawn Cemetery in Santa Monica. At the time of her death, her net worth stood at around $3 million, not reflective of fame or fortune, but of a woman who gave everything she had to a craft that didn't always love her back. A quiet icon, a mother, a survivor, and a woman who made millions laugh, even while quietly carrying the weight of her own sorrow. Norman fell as Stanley Roper. Born Norman Noah Feld on March 24, 1924, in Philadelphia, Norman Fell was 53 when he brought to life the unforgettable character of Stanley Roper on the hit sitcom Three's Company from 1977 to 1979. As the grumpy, tight-fisted landlord with a dry wit and a waddling walk, Fell turned marital misery into comedy gold, constantly dodging the affections of his overeager wife, Helen, and leaving audiences in stitches with every scowl and sarcastic remark. But while millions laughed at his on-screen antics, Fell's real life was painted in much quieter, lonelier tones. Behind the curtain, he endured the heartbreak of 3 failed marriages. His first union with Dolores Picos ended after just 4 years. Though he had 2 daughters with his second wife and later adopted a son during his final marriage, none of the relationships stood the test of time. Despite his fame, Fell was known to be soft-spoken and emotionally distant, traits that often created a silent gulf between him and those who loved him most. In his final years, Norman's health took a devastating turn. On Thanksgiving Day in 1998, he became too weak to get out of bed. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with multiple myeloma, an aggressive and incurable cancer of the bone marrow. Less than 3 weeks later, on December 14, 1998, Norman Fell passed away at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his net worth stood at an estimated $5 million, earned through a steady, decades-long career that spanned from Ocean's 11 to The Graduate, and ultimately reached its comedic peak with his Golden Globe-winning role on Three's Company. Though gone, Norman Fell's legacy endures, in every laugh, every grimace, and every reluctant smile he ever gave us. Peter Mark Richmond as Reverend Snow. Born Marvin Jack Richmond on April 16, 1927, Peter Mark Richmond became a familiar face to millions as Reverend Luther Snow, the stern, straight-laced father of Chrissy Snow, on the hit sitcom Three's Company. Appearing in the late 1970s, when Richmond was in his early 50s, his role provided a brilliant clash of old-school morality versus the carefree spirit of a younger generation. It was comedy laced with deeper reflections on family, values, and the shifting cultural tides. But few know that before he stepped onto stages and screens, Peter was a pharmacist, a path he took at his older brother's urging after losing his father at just 16. Yet his heart was always drawn to the spotlight. Trading prescriptions for performances, he went on to build an extraordinary career spanning over 130 roles in television, film, and theater. From Broadway to shows like Dynasty, Santa Barbara, and Star Trek: The Next Generation, Peter may not have been a household A-lister, but he was a steady, respected presence in Hollywood for over 5 decades. Off-screen, Peter lived a life that stood in contrast to the drama of the industry. He married actress Helen Landis in 1953 and remained devoted to her for nearly 70 years until his passing. Together, they raised 5 children, including acclaimed conductor Lucas Richmond. As he aged, Peter gradually stepped away from public life, his health quietly fading due to heart issues. Yet his mind remained sharp. He continued writing, creating, and engaging in deep conversations about art and philosophy with those closest to him. Peter Mark Richmond passed away peacefully on January 14, 2021, in Woodland Hills, California, at the age of 93. His net worth, estimated at around $1 million, reflected not excess but a life lived with integrity, grace, and quiet dedication to his craft. Robert Mandan as James Bradford, a name many remember from Three's a Crowd, where he played the stern, conservative father disapproving of his daughter's romance with Jack Tripper. Born on February 2, 1932, Mandan was 52 when he stepped into the role in 1984, bringing depth and gravitas to a character that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. The series lasted just one season, but Mandan's performance stood out, a reminder of how a seasoned actor can breathe life into even the briefest of roles. But behind the scenes, Mandan was waging a quiet war of his own, one not against ratings or roles, but against cancer. He kept his diagnosis a closely guarded secret, never disclosing the exact type. Instead, he faced his illness with dignity and silence, choosing to continue working when he could, making appearances on shows like Star Trek, Days of Our Lives, and General Hospital. Those closest to him later revealed that he endured multiple rounds of treatment and experienced periods of remission. Through it all, he remained the consummate professional. On April 29, 2018, Robert Mandan passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 86. Beyond the spotlight, his personal life was defined by quiet devotion. He was married to psychotherapist Sher Dixon from 1963 until his final day, a partnership that spanned over 5 decades. True to his nature, his funeral was held in private, and his body was cremated without public fanfare. Though he never became a household name, Robert Mandan's legacy endures, not just through the roles he played, but in the way he lived, with grace, privacy, and quiet strength. He left behind an estimated net worth of $5 million, built not on blockbuster fame, but on steady work, talent, and integrity. Irene Tedrow as Martha, a quiet force in Hollywood's shadows. Born on August 3, 1907, Irene Tedrow brought quiet strength to every role she touched. When she appeared as Martha in the 1979 Three's Company episode, The Older Woman, she was 72, playing not just a character, but a deeply human portrait of dignity, loneliness, and resilience. Though the role was brief, it echoed with truth, mirroring the silent battles of her own life. Off-screen, Irene's world was far from glamorous. She married William Kent, a German émigré who had fled the horrors of Nazi rule. Their life together was stable but rarely spotlighted. Raising 2 children, Roger and Enid, Irene often sacrificed personal joy to pursue a career that offered few starring roles, but demanded everything of her. She carried the dual weight of motherhood and financial responsibility while being typecast in supporting roles that, while essential, rarely earned recognition. As the years passed, the grind of show business took its toll. In 1989, a devastating stroke brought her acting career to an abrupt end. The next 6 years were marked by fading health and the haunting silence of being forgotten, a cruel contrast to the applause that once filled her world. Yet Irene's legacy is undeniable. From Dennis the Menace to Perry Mason, she carved a space in American television history. Her portrayal of Eleanor Roosevelt's grandmother in Eleanor and Franklin earned her an Emmy nomination at age 69, a rare spotlight in a career spent largely in the wings. At the time of her passing on March 10, 1995, from complications related to her stroke, her net worth stood at around $1 million. Modest by Hollywood standards, but rich in integrity. Irene Tedrow left behind more than a resume. She left a legacy of quiet power, fierce resilience, and characters that, like her, refused to be overlooked. Dick Sargent as Lloyd Cross. Born Richard Stanford Cox on April 19, 1930, in California, Dick Sargent made a brief but memorable guest appearance on Three's Company as Lloyd Cross at age 47. While the role was small, it carried the signature warmth and charm that made him a fixture on American TV. But it was his portrayal of the second Darren Stevens on the beloved series Bewitched, taking over from Dick York in 1969, that cemented his place in television history. With his easy smile and subtle wit, Sargent became a familiar and comforting presence in living rooms across the country. Yet behind that on-screen charm was a man quietly carrying a world of pain. For over 2 decades, Sargent shared his life with a partner whose name remained private, until a sudden brain hemorrhage took his partner's life in 1979. The loss was devastating. Though he grieved deeply, he kept it hidden, choosing instead to continue his work and devote time to quiet acts of charity. In 1991, in an era when Hollywood was still unforgiving, Sargent made the courageous decision to come out as gay, not for attention, but to send a message of hope to young LGBTQ people struggling in silence. "I'm a retroactive role model," he said with the humor and heart that defined him. His later years were marked by another battle, this time with prostate cancer. Diagnosed in 1989, he fought the disease with resilience, but by early 1994, it had taken its toll. On July 8, 1994, Dick Sargent passed away at the age of 64. He was cremated, leaving behind a legacy far deeper than the roles he played. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million, built from decades of acting appearances, and most of all, from the quiet dignity with which he lived his truth. Dick O'Neill, the familiar face who quietly carried the weight of a lifetime. With the kind, authoritative voice of someone you'd trust to play a judge or a stern but loving dad, Dick O'Neill became a staple of American television from the 1970s through the 90s. Born on August 29, 1928, he was best known for his role as Walter Nestle at age 51 in Three's Company. Audiences saw a man who seemed solid, dependable, someone who brought a sense of grounding to every scene he stepped into. But behind that steady presence was a man with his own quiet battles. Off-screen, Dick found love with actress Jackie Shaw during a performance of The Sound of Music. Together, they built a life and raised 3 daughters, Megan, Jillian, and Caitlin. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect home. But the demands of Hollywood meant long months on set, far from family. And while Dick never publicly complained, he once confided that his greatest regret wasn't a missed role or a forgotten line. It was the moments he missed as a father. The birthdays, the school plays, the little things that time never returns. On November 17, 1998, Dick O'Neill passed away from heart failure in Santa Monica. He was 70 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million, enough for a quiet, comfortable life, though modest by Hollywood standards. There were no headlines, no red carpet tributes. Just the quiet goodbye of a man who spent over 30 years shaping American television, then slipped away as gracefully as one of the many supporting characters he brought to life. For those who watched him, he was a familiar face. For a lucky few, he was simply Dad. Priscilla Morrrow as Mrs. Snow. Born on June 4, 1927, in Boston, Priscilla Morrrow became a beloved fixture on American television throughout the 1970s and 1980s. With her graceful poise and quiet strength, she brought heart to every role she played. Audiences remember her as Mrs. Snow, the prim and proper mother of Chrissy in Three's Company, a role she took on in her 50s. Though not a lead, she added depth and charm to the show, making her presence unforgettable. But it was her portrayal of Edie Grant, Lou Grant's emotionally layered and resilient wife on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, that truly left a lasting impression. Off-screen, Priscilla lived far from the spotlight. She married Paul Bryson in 1954, and the two shared a quiet, childless life in Port Aime, California. In her later years, Priscilla faced a private battle with chronic illness. What began as a common kidney infection slowly became a painful, recurring condition that left her frequently hospitalized. Despite receiving treatment at Cedars-Sinai, her health never fully recovered. On November 9, 1994, she passed away at the age of 67. Honoring her final wish, her ashes were scattered at sea, a peaceful farewell for a woman who lived with quiet dignity. At the time of her passing, Priscilla Morrrow's net worth was estimated around $1 million, not extravagant by Hollywood standards, but a testament to a career defined by grace, talent, and unwavering integrity. Emmeline Henry as J.C. Braddock, the woman who made us laugh, even as her own story veered toward tragedy. Born on November 1, 1928, Emmeline Henry was a familiar face to American audiences throughout the 1960s and 70s. Many remember her as J.C. Braddock, Chrissy's sharp, no-nonsense boss on Three's Company, a role she took on at age 49. Though her screen time was brief, Emmeline left an impression with the same comedic spark she brought to her 33-episode run as Amanda Bellows on I Dream of Jeannie. But behind the laughter was a life filled with quiet struggles. Emmeline started out as a teenage singer, dreaming of Broadway stardom when she moved to Hollywood. Her powerful voice caught attention, but it was her uncanny comedic timing that stole the show. She even stepped into the shoes of Carol Channing on stage, no small feat, and became a staple in many beloved productions. Still, personal happiness proved elusive. Her marriage to actor Mark Roberts lasted only 5 years, ending in 1974. She never remarried, had no children, and in her final years, lived alone. In 1979, while still appearing on TV, Emmeline began experiencing troubling symptoms, persistent headaches, dizziness, and confusion. Doctors soon diagnosed her with a malignant brain tumor. Though she underwent surgery, the illness advanced quickly. On October 8, 1979, just 3 weeks after her final television appearance, Emmeline Henry passed away at the age of 50. She was laid to rest at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated around $2 million, a testament to a successful career, but no measure of the private heartaches she carried. Emmeline was the kind of performer who made millions laugh on screen, even if she wept in silence when the cameras stopped rolling. Macon McCalman as Roland Wood, a name you might not remember, but a face you'll never forget. Born on December 30, 1932, Willis Macon McCalman brought stern charm to the role of Roland Wood, Janet's no-nonsense father on Three's Company. Appearing in his mid to late 40s, he embodied the classic old-school dad, gruff on the outside, yet quietly emotional underneath. But behind that steely presence was a man shaped by deep inner struggles. A veteran of the Korean War, Macon returned home with a passion for the arts, helping establish the Front Street Theater in Memphis to bring live performance to his community. He made an early mark on Broadway in shows like The Last of Mrs. Lincoln and An Enemy of the People, and broke into Hollywood with 1972's Deliverance. Still, the spotlight never quite found him. For over 30 years, he was often typecast as authority figures, judges, generals, those, appearing briefly, then fading quietly back into the shadows. In 1997, a massive heart attack ended his acting career. He returned to Memphis, retreating into a life of solitude. Multiple strokes would later rob him of his vitality, and on November 29, 2005, just a month shy of his 73rd birthday, Macon passed away. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1 million. Modest by Hollywood standards, but it spoke to a career built on persistence, not fame. The tragedies tied to Three's Company aren't just tales of loss. They're stories of artists who left their mark, even if they didn't always stand in the spotlight. Which scene from the show still lingers in your memory? If you want to keep honoring the stars we grew up loving, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep their legacy alive.